I'm very happy to introduce you to Lyn Hanush. Now, she has a book that came out in March, Putting a Face on America. And Lyn and two other ladies, and a total of 3 dogs, walked all across America from the top of Washington to Florida. This is back in 2003, and we're going to tell you a little bit about that, and plus this book, which is now available. Thank you so much for being here. It's a wonderful story. I do remember the press when you were walking, at least to the South Dakota side.
Right.
I got to ask, what inspired you to do such a thing, walking across the country?
Well, there were 2 things. One, it was a 50-year dream to originally to bicycle across America, and later I took up walking after I turned 40 and decided it would be walking. And when 9/11 happened, my husband and I both knew that it was time for me to take that walk and pray for America.
No, terrific. Now, what went into deciding which route you were going to take, routes?
Well, I had already walked from Mexico to Canada via the coast of California, Oregon, and Washington. So it was only natural that the walk would start where I left off at Blaine, Washington. And then I decided it would go at an angle and go down to Key West, Florida.
And you were able to convince 2 other ladies to go with you?
Yes, one other grandmother who was actually even older than I am, and she went along with me for the whole way. And then my granddaughter, who was 16 at the time, went with us for 8.5 months.
Wow. How long was the entire journey?
The entire journey was 14.5 months, and we went through 15 states.
Yeah, amazing. So just over a year then.
That's right.
By a couple of months.
That's right.
Now, this is just really an amazing story, and the book is absolutely fantastic. I love many of the stories that you tell and write about in there.
Thank you.
And you know, when you were walking across the country, you were getting direct contact with people, unlike if you drove a car, certainly if we were playing, but even driving, you know, you kind of zoom by things, but you had a lot of stories and connections with people in every state and every town you've been in. That's
right. We met a lot of people would stop and just say, "Are you having car trouble? What's the problem?" and be ready to help us. And then when they heard what we were doing, that we were praying for America, they would often ask us to pray for a specific request for them as well, which was really neat. In fact, I know that you talk about curious onlookers. One of them was a highway patrolman, I think, in South Dakota. That's right. He kind of drove back and forth, and he finally stopped and asked what was going on. That's right, and he was a delight. And one of our dogs that was walking with us that day, they didn't all walk all the time, but the one that was walking with us that day just loved him and fell asleep on his shoe. Oh, really? Wow. How long would you walk in a given day? I guess it varied on the conditions? It did. We averaged 15 to 20 miles a day, and probably an average of 3 miles an hour. Wow. Now, of course, also somebody might ask, okay, it's 3 ladies and they're walking. What about security? Did you feel safe the entire time? Oh, we felt incredibly safe. We felt like people were always watching out for us. Truck drivers were incredibly wonderful. They seemed to, we always had the impression that maybe they had radioed to other truck drivers and said, watch out for these ladies. The police were wonderful all across America. We were very careful where we walked. We sometimes walked, though, where people told us it might be dangerous even. But we would just pray about that and feel that we were supposed to do it. I know, fairly nearby South Dakota, you had one of those instances, I think in southeast Montana. That's right. Between Billings and here. That's correct. Everything was perfectly okay. It was. It was wonderful. In fact, the people actually came out when they heard about us and talked to us. A Crow legislator came and stopped and spent a half hour with us telling us about the Crow Nation, which was really fascinating, and many of them asked us to pray for them. Now, I know that you really had a great time on your South Dakota trek, and you went through the hills. I went by, I believe, a jewel cave, was it? That's right. And so forth. So obviously the scenery, but you had some fun experiences with a family and a pastor and lots of people. Yes, yes. There was a pastor in Custer that we had an incredible experience with, Joel Silkowski, and he is one of the children of the sculptor of Crazy Horse. And so it was a delight to visit with him and attend his church. Definitely. Now, what would you say, this might be kind of one of those questions that, oh boy, it would take me 20 minutes to answer, but I'll try it on anyway. What are a couple of things that you learned maybe on this trip about Americans in different parts of the country, American in general, that maybe you didn't know or didn't realize before you started this walk? Well, I think in general, one of the biggest things was that you hear a lot of bad news on the media sometimes, and all across America, we found that people were really wonderful. It didn't matter what state we were in, what type of people, what they were doing. We even had people who were heckling us, and once they found out what we were doing, their whole attitude changed, and they were just incredibly wonderful to us.
Yeah, that's absolutely wonderful to hear. And I think also, since you have that close contact with all these people in those 15 states, you really see the real America, not what the media always portrays, not what Hollywood portrays. These are real, down-to-earth people doing their day-to-day work and living.
Absolutely, absolutely. We met many of the rural people because that was our goal, was to walk through rural America. And so we had everybody from President Carter. We met President Carter in Georgia, to people in Missouri in the back hills, and it was just wonderful.
In the Ozarkia area.
Exactly.
Yeah, now, you're actually touring the country right now. You're not walking right now anyway,
That's
but you're
right.
Promoting the book and talking to some people.
That's correct.
That.
Yes, I've been on a speaking tour and book signing tour for about 4 months already, and I have 2 months to go.
Wow. And I understand you're walking again next year?
That's correct. I'm walking from Florida to Maine this time,
the East
and
Coast.
continuing the prayers for our nation during the election year.
Right, that's right. It is coming up next year.
It is.
It's going to be an interesting one.
Oh, yes.
I think it's just a wonderful story, and really appreciate your inspiration and your companions that went with you to do this. I think it's just a really good testament to what you're doing. And the book is absolutely wonderful. It's a great read. I'd highly recommend it. Putting a Face on America. It is available here in Rapid City.
Yes, at the Walden Bookstore in the mall, and also at the Bodybuilders Christian Bookstore on 7th Street.
On 7th Street. It's a really great book, and I know that you're really going to enjoy it. Thank you so much for coming on the show this morning. Really appreciate it.
Thank you, Eric.
And we'll be right back.